Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Mentality Mondays, Healthy Masculinity Conversation Series. I'm Magnus Dahlia, one of your hosts today. I use him, his pronouns, Mentality Project Coordinator. And I'm going to let my co-hosts introduce themselves, and we're here with Klub Spike, and then they're going to introduce themselves, and we're going to get started with today's conversation.
Awesome.
Hello. Sorry, Anthony.
You're good.
Zoom, as y'all know, is a little awkward. But if y'all have been tuning in since last season and a couple episodes before, y'all know I'm Chelsea Hill. I use she and they pronouns, one of the health promotion specialists here at the Well, doing sexual health and sexual violence prevention work on campus. And I'll pass it to Anthony.
Hey y'all, my name's Anthony Siliberto. I'm one of the assistant directors in fraternity and sorority programs here at Tulane, and also the co-staff lead with Chelsea on the Mentality Project. We are excited to have our guests here today. Magnus, do you want to kick us off with the first question and do introductions?
Yeah, so Jackson Giorgos, we just want y'all to introduce yourselves and tell us a bit about your role in Klub Spike and the history of the club.
Sure. I'll get started. How's it going, everyone? My name's Jackson. I'm happy to be here today. He, him, his. So Klub Spike just started last year, and we're really excited for it. Kind of been playing spikeball for a long time now, and kind of freshman, sophomore year, was lucky to find some friends that were also really interested in it. And we wanted to expand our kind of, who we could play with and find new kids that played it. So we wanted to get the club started. So now we're in kind of our third-ish semester, but with COVID and everything, it's been kind of slow going, but we've been growing steadily.
Yeah, my name is Giorgos. My pronouns are he, him, his. And yeah, just like Jackson, we kind of started playing Spike together, I'd say maybe sophomore year, first semester, so about a year ago. And yeah, we found a good group of guys and we started the club, and it's grown a lot since I'd say right before COVID started. That's kind of when we started it, but since then it's grown a lot. So that's been great.
Awesome.
Good to hear.
And about your roles, what roles do you play in the club?
Oh, sure. I founded the club with a couple friends who have all graduated since then. So now I'm holding the role of president.
And I'm also president, vice president, kind of a loose term, I guess, but we're kind of like the leaders of the club.
Sure.
There are a few other freshmen actually who have leadership positions. We were actually both supposed to be abroad this semester, so we were ready to pass on the reins to some younger kids, but unfortunately that was canceled last minute. But we're back here running it again, leading the charge. So kind of like, I guess what we do is we just set up meetings for people who want to play, like smaller groups, obviously because of COVID, and we want to keep everything safe. And occasionally we'll also try and get like a friendly tournament or something of that sort going. But obviously it's been difficult. So that's kind of what we do, and I'm excited for what else we can do once restrictions are lifted.
Well, great. Let's dive more into spikeball, because I personally do not know anything about it. So I like to know new things. So for those like me who haven't played spikeball before, can you just briefly describe how it's played and why you both decided to be a part of the organization, besides, connection and, finding others that are also but just wondering what your passion and maybe some other personal things that go along with that.
Sure. Yeah, spikeball, I think the easiest way to describe it is it's very similar to beach volleyball, with the idea of kind of a 2-on-2, and the ball has to stay off the ground, and you get kind of 3 taps to get it back onto the net. So in volleyball, it'll be over the net, but so the way spikeball works is there's kind of a round, small trampoline type surface. It's a net, but it's kind of acts like a trampoline, and you get 3 taps to get it back onto the net, and then it switches to the other team to hit it. And I would say what's really fun about it is because it's round, you can rotate. And so it's not like you're just standing on either side getting back and forth, but the game gets more fun when you're kind of spinning back around and kind of changing the direction of the play. In terms of why I want to be part of it, and this actually kind of connects to our roles as leaders, is the culture around spikeball is a really cool culture. It's a very much, so I started playing when I was in high school, and I actually went to a couple of tournaments that were run by like the spikeball organization. And I just remember having a ton of fun being kind of surrounded by all these people who were kind of healthy and in great moods and excited to be there and just kind of positive people and falling in love with the culture kind of just as much as the game. And so I think that was why I wanted kind of that to be part of my Tulane experience and why I wanted to bring that to Tulane a little bit. And so I would say our roles as leaders, other than just saying kind of here's when to play, right, when to show up, is kind of trying to establish that culture at Tulane of kind of enthusiasm and positivity.
It's a
Yeah.
great way.
I agree with that. I think another reason that it's kind of got a great place at Tulane is I feel like the sport slash like active I guess community isn't as kind of open as we'd like it to be. I feel like besides intramural sports, club sports aren't really as part of my experience as I wish they were. And I think Club Spike has really filled that kind of void where I need I don't need it, but I really enjoy kind of being around other people, being active, playing a sport, if you will. I mean, back in high school, when you're on a team, you're practicing every single day with the same people, and it's kind of like a community, a team. Like you're staying active, and I didn't have that here at Tulane my freshman year, and Club Spike has really kind of helped fill that space that I kind of needed to be filled. I felt like.
Very cool. And Club Spike, or spikeball in general, is pretty new, like a concept, right? It's not super old. I remember first seeing it maybe in like undergrad or high school. And what I really liked about it is like it could be played super recreationally or competitively. And it's super portable. Like you can take it to the beach. You can be on like a quad and play. So yeah, I really think it's a cool concept. Glad they are telling us more about it. And I'm glad like it's gaining traction at Tulane. How many members do y'all have this year?
When we host a session, we like it when 15 people show up. That's pretty good. Like that's like a really good day. That
Okay.
means we're having multiple games going, 3 games going at once. That's awesome because it's 4 people to a game at a time. That's the best. Sometimes only 6 people show up, 8. There's about 70 people in the chat. And
There's
so we
100
add bigger groups and sometimes they'll be like, oh, we're just a practice session this week. And then like last semester we had like 1 or 2 tournaments where we like got a poster board and those had much bigger people showing up. So it kind of ranges, but it's still small, but it's big enough where you can play against different people and we can have multiple games going at once.
Very cool. Very cool. I love the leadership aspect it also brings, especially for y'all, and you can pass that torch maybe next semester to some of the younger members. Really wondering, like, what have y'all gotten out of being a part of the organization? I know, Jackson, you said you founded the organization with some people that graduated, but what have y'all gotten out of the experience, and what are you hoping for members to get out of it as well?
For me, like I kind of said earlier, the kind of team slash community aspect to it is something I really enjoy. It's a good way to kind of meet new people and kind of get out of your groove, if you will. I feel especially now, like I'm just seeing the same people day in and day out, as you should because of the situation. But every once in a while, it's good to like in a safe manner, obviously, to meet some new people, especially who share a similar hobby with you, and kind of, I mean, each game of spikeball is different in the sense that, I mean, me and Jackson play together, but once we're partnered with different people, then the play styles completely change. So like the more kind of people you meet through that, the more you're exposed to like different ways of playing the game and different strategies and all that. So that's something I really enjoy as well.
The one thing I would add to that would be on kind of a personal level, the kind of job of being a figurehead. It's once you're kind of starting the club and trying to run a club, it's no longer just getting to show up and play with a couple friends, but there's kind of an expectation that you're being diplomatic and talking to people, making sure everyone's playing and organizing things and handling conflict. Not that there's much conflict, but or kind of stepping up and being the guy to go join that game with beginners over there, even though it's not really fun, to kind of stepping up into that role. So it's certainly been an experience that I've gotten something out of. trying to fill those kind of shoes.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's great. It sounds like there's a lot of room for personal growth and personal development, as well as like relationships that you can build that are pretty valuable out of one of the sports. So that's awesome. So I wanted to ask y'all, with relation to masculinity, what are some thoughts, ideas, or concepts that come to mind around the word or the term masculinity? I guess in connection to Spike.
Right. No, yeah. So, it's obviously very broad and it ranges a lot, I think, by who you are, kind of is how you decide masculinity is defined. And if I think that would be a huge red flag if you said, this is how it's defined, right? It would be, this is how I've witnessed it, this is how I've experienced it. And so I would definitely say I've witnessed it in a kind of typical, or however you want to define that, fashion of being kind of the competitive, kind of the jockey type, or like the old high school jock type of wanting to be strong and fit and kind of the dominant force and the cool guy and, drinking. It's all that kind of stuff that we associate with toxic masculinity. But at the same time, I think at Tulane, I've seen that be countered exactly as it should be. I think that when you're in high school, there's kind of there's more need to fit in, and there's more need to follow the status quo, and there's less challenge. And then you get to college and a few things happen. A, you're learning at a higher level, and education by itself naturally forces you to open your eyes a little bit. Like, for example, you learn about history and you learn that as long as people have written things down, there have been gay people, right? And then that makes it pretty hard to be fully prejudiced against gays and call it unnatural if you know that as long as humanity's been around, it's been happening, right? So education is naturally a pushback to a lot of kind of toxic masculine or mono-masculine ideas, right? If here's how it has to be. Versus, that was one of the things that I liked about this show that I was excited about when you guys invited us, was this idea that it's, mentality, and it was the idea of a healthy masculinity, not the idea that there can be none. There could be no way to describe masculinity as a thing, but rather the idea that there can be a more healthy way to look at it. And there could be a way to say, here's what I think being a man is, and here's why I understand that might be my personal interpretation of it, and might be what I want, but not what you want, and that's okay. And so that's kind of how I see it, I guess.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that in a sense, but I also want to add that once you make that transition from high school to college, your bubble grows and you're obviously exposed to new people. And I feel like you, to a certain extent, become kind of like much more comfortable with yourself. I know, like, in high school, I mean, at least for me, I was comfortable with my friends, and like that kind of toxic masculinity wasn't really there with your kind of, I would say, closer friends. But once you stepped outside of that bubble, there was kind of that like idea that you had to be that, like, that big guy, that manly man. And like once you get to school, Tulane or college, I feel like that kind of idea or concept takes a step back, and you don't feel that pressure whatsoever, or I guess to a much lesser extent. And obviously that depends situation to situation, but I feel like if you find the right group of people for you, you're not going to feel that need to make yourself be more masculine, if you will.
Yeah, I think you'll bring up excellent points to talk about sort of the social learning that's involved in the development of identity, but also the educational aspect, and kind of open your eyes as you go through life to the different forms that these identities can take on. And like you said, Jackson, recognizing this is what I think it is to be a man, but also I know that this is my own interpretation. There are other interpretations and manifestations of these ways to be. I think y'all hit on the value of healthy as opposed to just like getting rid of any concept of it pretty nicely. But I wanted to ask as well, or I wanted to push back a little bit and emphasize that, like, in different social circles, and even for people who do feel comfortable with their friends, there might still be some sort of residual learned pressure to uphold these traditionally masculine or unhealthy or toxic ideals of what it is to be a man. So even though like we might be comfortable in our own social circles, it might not always be the case that that someone else who is comfortable with their friends doesn't still feel that need that can be kind of triggered or brought up in different situations.
And I was gonna say, it really just sounds like Club Spike has a more evolved view of masculinity, and clearly you guys still have experiences of the other side of masculinity that's not so healthy at Tulane. And so I'm just wondering, in your roles in Club Spike, how do y'all have these conversations about masculinity, or how do y'all go about cultivating a culture where it's okay to not be a typical masculine identified person? I feel like I get that energy from y'all, and so I'm just wondering if y'all naturally have these conversations, or how did y'all get to where you are now?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I think there's a few ways it happens. It's not through a direct conversation, right? We've never, let's stand in a circle and talk about this for a minute. That's never really happened. But I would say it goes through a few ways. One, and it's something we joke about, but I think it has a positive remnants, where I always say it's a PG-13 club, right? I'll say that a lot in practice. Some guy will be swearing or something after he loses a game or misses a serve, and it'll be me sometimes. But no, it's a PG-13 club. We keep it to one swear a game, right? That's kind of the joke that we make about it. And while it's lighthearted, it's also, I think, an important reminder of, you need to be aware of how you're representing yourself in the club while you're out here, and that there are people that could be watching us walking by, that we're not in our own little world here. And so I think that's one way in which there's kind of a reminder of, you need to be aware of your actions while you're here. I think that's a powerful response to a lot of problems, but also masculinity definitely falls in that category. If you tell people you need to be aware of your actions, of how they are reflecting, getting people to reflect on themselves, of how things I say are interpreted, in my larger community, if we're in Audubon Park or something, who's around, how does it impact other people? I think that's one part of it. And I think the other part of it is from a leadership standpoint of encouraging other people to play that aren't maybe the most typical, or four guys might be playing that are all similar guys, and then to encourage that other guy that's sitting over there, or the girl or something that doesn't quite fit our box in this toxic sense or this masculine sense, saying, no, you're part of this too, right? You come and join and play with us. And then the last one I would say would be kind of through the leadership perspective. When we text in the chat, we try to get people to get excited. We're not trying to be too cool. We're not trying to have this, sway kind of above it all attitude. And instead, we're trying to engage enthusiasm and be quirky and fun with it. So I think those are kind of all the ways I can think of. What do you think, Giorgos?
Yeah, those are all pretty good points. I think actually one of your better points, which might not seem like a big deal to most people, but the messages in the chat, I think are just a big part of the club, and how we're kind of embracing all sorts of people who kind of bring many different things to the table. I don't think I've ever sent like a toxic or a kind of super come at me, I'm better than you kind of message in that chat, where it's really singling someone out, or something like that, I guess. The messages are really lighthearted, and I don't want to say a joke, but they're definitely meant to be more inviting. And I think, like Jackson said, that's kind of a way that we're not directly having the conversations, but kind of inviting more different types of people, if you will. Typically, if you come to one of our meetings, there's probably 2 girls maybe. And I would say that we're trying to up those numbers. And I think the messages are a way of doing that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it sounds like y'all create a really welcoming environment through role modeling, in a sense, and through personal responsibility in terms of recognizing how what you say and do does have an effect on other people, but also that you're actively trying to make a a more fun, welcoming environment. So that it clicks for why y'all give off a very welcoming vibe, at least in my view.
Yeah, I really appreciate you being conscious of the messages and expectations you have for members, and recognizing like we do need to be, more open and find ways to connect with people that are outside of our typical demographic that we attract. I'm curious from y'all standpoint, how do y'all provide support to members just like in everyday life? I know y'all keep it lighthearted with messages and kind of try that route, but what else are y'all doing to like provide support to members, or is it kind of like through friend groups, as an organization, things like that?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that we are breaking any barriers here at Club Spike, but it's just a release, right? It's just something to kind of get away for a little bit, time to get away from your friend group, maybe good time to definitely get away from studying, get out of the library or not think about that test for an hour, right? There's no, we're not want to make sure everyone's mental health okay in a conversation like earlier, but it's certainly a time to get out and just kind of have a little bit of a release and be a little competitive. I don't know. What do you think, Giorgos?
I agree with that. It's definitely a nice release from kind of your everyday life, especially when during this quarantine and COVID, you don't really get to be as active. But I will say that there are relationships being formed to the point where people feel comfortable to come and talk to you about kind of everyday problems or a situation they're going through, especially because as like older students being juniors, like the freshmen definitely kind of look up to us in a sense that like we've been around the block, we kind of know what we're doing. And they sometimes do look for advice or need someone to talk to, and obviously we're there for them. I will say that doesn't happen as much, but there definitely have been like a few situations or times where I have been approached by a freshman or a younger student and they've needed some advice with something, and we're always there for that.
I love that. I appreciate that y'all can form that community, whether it be more lighthearted or, be the person that they can come to for advice, just someone to talk to.
Yeah, absolutely. And also I was just thinking about what y'all had said about what you said, Giorgos, about the chat as well. I think you're right that probably is a very, very important tool that's overlooked, especially, but it's so important right now when we don't have as many opportunities as y'all been saying to like get together and do something in person. So the chat really does go a long way. There's something I was thinking about with the ability to form those relationships so that people feel, you're approachable and they can talk to you, which is huge. So good on y'all. So I don't know if Anthony or Chelsea, y'all have the question you wanted to ask. But I was going to ask with regards to competition and like the attitude of competitiveness within Club Spike and within sports in general, how do you see competition and masculinity complementing each other? And how do you think they might contrast or conflict with one another in terms of healthy masculinity, I suppose?
I don't think well, let me be the first to say like there are times where I don't want to say like I'm being toxically masculine, but I feel like part of the competition can kind of bring out a more of a aggressive, like kind of talk trash a little bit, try and get in someone's head. And I don't want to say that's toxic. It might not be like the best situation, obviously, but it's part of the game, and it's not just like a physical game, it's a mental game 100%. If you can kind of get in someone's head and like their serve is off and you can kind of like tell them a little bit like before they serve, you're like, are you gonna hit the net this time? Like they might like be a little tweaked out and miss the net and you get the point and you win the game. So I mean, there's definitely like the competitive and toxic side definitely mesh a little bit. Like it is a game and there has to be a winner, and like you're gonna do what you can to win. but it's about not crossing that line and becoming like that toxic character, especially when you're older. Like if you're a junior or senior and you're just bullying kids and like trash talking them the entire time, like no one's gonna want to talk to you, no one's gonna want to come to the pub. Like you have to kind of not even straddle that line, but I don't want to stay well clear either, but definitely kind of not come that close to crossing it, if that makes sense.
Does
I think that's a great point, Yours, about how it is a game. And there is a winner and loser. And I hate to lose. And I'm sure a lot of people hate to lose and love to win. And it's like, in that sense, I think there's nothing unhealthy about competition. And there's nothing unhealthy about wanting to win when there is going to be a winner, right? When there is going to be that. And yes, there can be, I think, some toxicness sometimes, but, guys thinking they're just better athletes because they're guys. And, you serve like a girl, like things like that definitely exist. I don't see them a lot at Klub Spike. Like, I feel like maybe this is naive of me or idealistic, but I feel like that stuff's a little immature. But one thing I would say, though, to extend from what Iris was saying about how it's a game with a winner, that trait becomes very toxic when there doesn't have to be a winner, right? When it's having a conversation, when you're trying to one up somebody with a story, or when you're trying to be kind of the baddest guy in the room, right? And you feel like you have to be this dominant person all the time. That's when the trait goes from being kind of fun and competitive and to someone you don't want to be around, to someone who has this kind of toxic trait of, I need to be the best all the time. I need to beat people. And I think that can be a very toxic masculine trait of, I'm the biggest person in the room, therefore I get the right to talk and I get the right to, my opinion gets heard. That's why we have laws and stuff, right? That we're not just a society where the biggest guy in the room gets to talk and make the decisions. But when it comes down to a room of people, sometimes that can be what happens. Sometimes that person can kind of push their will on the group. And that's the kind of sense where it's not about winning. It's not about, if you have that mindset, that can be a toxic trait.
I think for me, going back to a point Georgos made about, I never try to be the person that sends a message that like I'm better than you. And I think that relates super well into the conversation about, healthy and friendly competition, because there's a huge difference between healthy competition. And we talked to another club sport the other week, and they were saying, we talk to the other team members after a game, and they're on the field, we're super competitive, but like we can all get along after. And I think there's a huge difference in people like that versus a toxic environment where negative comments are constantly made and there's constant aggression and things like that.
Talking more about traditional masculinity in a sense, I wanted to know if there are any aspects of traditional masculinity that resonate, with who you both possibly want to be, and if there's aspects, of course, of traditional masculinity that you absolutely think are less constructive and that don't resonate with you.
Sure. And I would say I'm not ashamed to say that a lot of traditional masculinity things are things I want to stand up to. There's a lot of, it's a cheap way to think about it, but there's a lot of movie characters, right, who I think of as very masculine, who I want to emulate. We were watching the Wolverine movie the other day, or a more modern James Bond movie, right, where those are all traits where you kind of want, so, being a rock, right, a stable person that people can rely on, I think is sometimes seen as a masculine trait that I want to emulate. Being, I don't know, I think stability is an important one. I think I want to be healthy and fit, right? I think that's one that a lot of people think of when they think of masculinity in the traditional sense. I think there's a gentleman version, right? Oh, all right, let's go this direction. The term gentleman's, right? Gentleman's farm, a gentleman's podcast, something like that, right? I think would be can have a negative connotation that it doesn't have to have, right? It can be kind of the well-read, the guy that likes coffee, and the guy that wants to dress with a certain fashion, maybe ride the motorcycle, right? I think all those kind of things don't have to be negative, and you can want to associate with a lot of them. Ones that I want to definitely avoid would be things like, well, for one, assuming that that's how you have to do it, right? That would be the biggest one. Assuming this is the way to do it would be the number one thing to avoid. Certain traditional relationships with women, I would definitely want to avoid. She does the dishes, she does the cooking, things like that. I certainly would avoid. In picturing,
you heard it here first, ladies.
Hopefully they're listening. you think, Giorgos?
Yeah, definitely the ones you want to avoid, I agree with. I mean, that's stuff that's sadly not all in the past, but it should be. And I mean, it's 2021, and like not everyone is kind of on the same wavelength, and we all still have a ways to go with that. But something I kind of I feel like I want to more embrace, kind of like Jackson said, is the I don't want to say like quiet, stern, stable, but more like kind of like laid back. I don't need, like, me as a person, I don't feel like I need to stick my nose in everything, unless like it really needs to happen. Like, I'm not gonna get involved in all like my house drama or like a little fight here and there. But like if I'm like being called upon, I guess, or like I need to step in some manner or sense, then that's something I want to be able to do, and I want to help out. And it's not kind of like, I don't want to make it sound like I got to be like that superhero that like saves the day and like fixes all the problems, but I want to be able to help out in any way I can. And I feel like that's not just kind of like a masculine thing, but I also think it's just because of the way I was raised, and like I come from a good family and we help each other out and all that stuff. I don't really feel the need to kind of embrace the like big, like super like muscular, kind of like strongest guy in the room vibe. It's more, for me, it's kind of like the sophisticated, quiet, knows when to act guy, if that makes sense. But obviously, like, you do want to be fit, you want to like be in good health, like that part of the like strong, bigger guy like is fine. I feel like if you want to be healthy, but I just don't feel like I need to like cross that line where it's the biggest guy in the room, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, those both
Yeah.
make a great sense. And I think what's interesting too is that like in certain ways, y'all each have slightly different versions of how you want to be, and that's the whole point of these types of conversations as well, is to emphasize and to highlight that, you know, people have an individual relationship with their identity and what that's going to look like, and all of these different forms of masculinity, you know, take some components of femininity or take some components of like a new form of masculinity. There doesn't have to be this one size fits all approach. And I think y'all are very great examples of that. I also think a lot of times these conversations are challenging for people because they feel a little resistant to the idea of, you know, someone's going to tell me that across the board I'm bad because I'm masculine and they think masculinity is bad. But the way that people are able to blend and integrate these different aspects of different types of identity into themselves to be who they want to be enables a more you know, constructed person. No one's all good or all bad. No one's like all masculine or all feminine. There's just a blend of people, and part of like orienting yourself towards growth in a sense seems to be recognizing you can be at these different points and trying to get somewhere else, and that there are certain things you value and certain things you don't want to adhere to, and you just, you know, kind of navigate life trying to put yourself together in the way that you want to be. So I think it's really cool that y'all are both very good friends, both in a very similar position within your club, but also having these slightly different forms of who you want to be with respect to masculinity. So cool. I think that's nice.
Yeah. Identity doesn't have to be limited to a box that society tells us it needs to be. Appreciate that. As we start like winding down with our questions today, I'm just wondering, like, do you think these conversations happen enough or as frequently as they should? And if not, how do you think we can go about, you know, this is a big part of our jobs for Chelsea and I, as Magnus as our student coordinator, how can we go about, you know, providing students the tools to have conversations around masculinity and identity and things of that nature?
Well, I'm definitely not one who thinks these conversations need to happen all the time. I don't think that these conversations need to happen at the beginning of every class. You know, every class needs to talk about it, and every group of guys need to talk about it. It needs to happen whenever people grew. I definitely don't think that. And I think it's a charged conversation that can sometimes happen just through little things, through little kind of like, no, let's not go there. Come on, you don't really think that. I think sometimes it doesn't need a full-blown conversation. But I think it's something that does need to happen sometimes. And I think that this podcast or this show is doing a great job with it, because it's not just us talking right now. It's Giorgos and I agreed to do it, and then we talked to a few of our friends about it. We said, hey, we're doing this thing. What do you guys think about some of this stuff? And it's kind of a domino effect when something like that happens. Hey, earlier today we were talking about this, so maybe it doesn't come up if it wasn't for this podcast right here, where you guys are going to ask us these questions. We don't want to sound like fools when we're out here answering them. So it just kind of forces us to say to our roommates, hey, let's take a second and let's think about this for a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Asking us to do it definitely had like a little bit of a domino effect for us, me and Jackson, in terms of talking to other people and trying to figure things out. And obviously, neither of us are experts on the matter by any means whatsoever. And I think this conversation has not only kind of helped us kind of explore what we think about masculinity, but I think it'll also show like other students that like people like Jackson and I, like if we can talk about it, like they can also talk about it. And it's kind of going to break that barrier, hopefully, and people will become more comfortable talking about these subjects. I will say that like I agree with Jackson, these conversations don't need to happen all the time, but I think they need to happen more. I feel like they definitely have not happened enough during my time at Tulane. Maybe like the last time, if you're not taking a class, then maybe like freshman orientation, maybe. That's what jumps out to my head, talking about like, I don't know if you guys had to read Beartown, but we had to read Beartown. And that book had some like sexual violence in it. It was a very masculine book. And we definitely discussed that with like wave leaders and like teachers who led discussion groups, I think. But I'm not 100% sure how to kind of fruitfully and actively kind of make these conversations happen, because you really can't force them to happen. Right. If you force them to happen, there's going to be pushback. In my opinion, like it's not something that's easy to talk about, and a lot of people are uncomfortable talking about it. So kind of finding that balance where you're inviting people to talk about it, like you guys have done with me and Jackson, and having a good conversation about it is something that's difficult to do. And I mean, I can't come up with any ideas off the top of my head, but this podcast is
definitely. But I would add to what you were saying, Giorgos. Hey, I do think Beartown was a great thing for us all to read before we got here. I really enjoyed that book, and definitely think it's come up randomly in conversations before. So it was a great place for us all to be at the same level kind of going in. But he talks a little bit about orientation, and making orientation a little more reasonable would make these conversations seem more realistic. I remember being in orientation thinking this is just a little too far, that I don't really have interest to hear what this person has to say. Like, I remember sitting in one orientation where they were talking about kind of use of words, and we all know what kind of words these days we should be seriously avoiding. And they started with saying how you can never use the word idiot, because idiot just is so offensive to people. And I was like, all right, well, the rest of this is going to be a little hard to listen to if we know that this is the starting point. Or I remember being in one of the sexual ones where they said, relations after one beer are inappropriate. It's like, so are we really supposed to listen to the next 30 minutes of this and take it seriously, So I think maybe turning the conversation, or, if, for example, this conversation started with you guys saying there are no genders and there's absolute perfect fluidity and there's no model you should have for it at all, then the conversation would be harder to have. And so approaching it in kind of a way that people can kind of bring in their ideas more easily is important, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that approachability is sometimes lost when there's too much of a charge at the starting point, kind of like what you're hitting on. And I think that sometimes if you get overloaded with a lot of information, like in a case of orientation, it might be tough when you're trying to, come to like get acquainted with the school. It can be a little difficult to be paying attention to all these different things at once when there's a lot of charge to these conversations, and they are very important, but how and when we start to have them does have an impact on how we actually respond to it. So I think I think that's a fair point, a fair critique of some of the ways that this education can fall flat or fall flatter than it's intended to. But I'm glad that you'll find that these types of conversations on a podcast like this, and that it actually did have a domino effect. I'm very glad to hear that. And I'm sure that other student organizations also kind of kept that going. So that's reassuring. That's nice. So I think that, yeah, you kind of hit on my last question there. But this has been a great conversation. We wanted to ask you all to take a moment, plug Club Spike some more for audience members that might be interested in joining. How can interested students get involved? And I guess what upcoming things do you have going on regarding physical distancing limitations?
Well, the Tulane just announced that we can start to kind of expand a little bit. We were totally shut down for that kind of, well, it was supposed to be 2 weeks originally, but ended up being like that 4-week period where things were really high. So we've started to open back up. I think our first play session was just last Saturday, right, Giorgos?
Yeah, it wasn't more than a week. Yeah.
And obviously we're outside in kind of bigger spaces. That's mostly how we do it.
Yeah, we just end up going to the park, really. Audubon. Right side of Audubon, you'll find us there. Normally like a Saturday or maybe a Wednesday.
Friday afternoons.
Yeah. Like we don't have like a Club Spike hotline that you can call and like we'll tell you when we're playing and like, but if you want to get involved, I mean,
well, there's the WaveSync. Definitely go through
there's
WaveSync,
Sure.
and you can join and reach out to us through that directly. And then we mostly activate through GroupMe. But when you join, we'll be able to add you.
yeah.
Terrific.
So much.
Y'all have
We'll
any?
be- I was gonna say, we'll be sure to plug your WaveSync information in the description box.
Awesome, thank you.
Do y'all have any social media that we could also kind of tag or plug?
Yes, we have an Instagram.
Okay.
I run, and I use it like a burner account. It's awesome. Let me find the username of it real quick. It's Tulane
Yeah,
underscore.
we'll put it in the chat as well.
Yeah, that's a good idea. That works.
No, I was just saying when we post the video, we'll also in our caption make sure to @ y'all on Instagram so people can click easily.
Great. All right, well, thank you guys for having us on.
Thank you for coming. We actually just had 2 last brief questions for y'all.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, so sorry. Just before we wrap out today's conversation, is there any advice, as you guys were speaking, that you've had instances where freshmen, look up to you and have come to you for advice. Just wondering if you had any advice or messages for Tulane students regarding cultivating a healthier view of their masculinity. If there's something that you personally did, any healing work or any reflection that you did, or any advice, like just be yourself, be vulnerable, whatever it is, would be amazing for Tulane students to hear.
I would say maybe if the kind of image and person that you're trying to live up to isn't who you want to be, then you're not thinking about it right. That if you have this image of what you think you're supposed to be and therefore you're trying to live up to it, even though that doesn't feel like exactly who you want to be, you should reconsider. And when you're getting to college, there are so many different friend groups you can be part of. So take your time and kind of find something that feels right to you.
I think that's a good point. I'll also add to just do it. Like I just realized that's what Nike says, but like I really think that's a good thing to do. Is just do it. If there's something you're considering and it might be out of your comfort zone, try it out. I know I tried out Club Lacrosse my freshman year. I didn't really like it. But now looking back, it's like, what if I didn't try that? I'd still be wondering if that was for me or if it wasn't for me. And I know there are instances where I'm kind of looking back on my Tulane experience and I'm kind of wondering, did I do it right almost? Is there something I missed that would have changed my experience completely? And obviously there was. Obviously, as a freshman and a younger kid, I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I didn't know everything that I know now. And while it's okay to kind of miss a chance and miss an opportunity, do your best not to. And if like your friend asks you like, you want to go to this club meeting or you want to go to this new kind of, I don't know, meeting outside of school, like there's an outdoor club or like some activities expo or something like that, just try it out. And you'll learn a lot more about yourself, I feel like, than just kind of sitting in your room and being comfortable. Get uncomfortable.
Appreciate that. I think that both of those are great pieces of advice and messages a lot of our students, even those, sophomore, junior years, can hear and, live up to, especially in times of COVID. Like, gotta challenge yourself to get out there and do different things you're not used to. Just as a wrap up, what are some of the biggest changes you'd like to see in masculinity programming at Tulane? Y'all have hinted at, continue doing this kind of podcast show situation, but what are some other things you could think of that we could continue doing as a university?
I was actually just thinking about this right after one of the previous questions, but I feel like the reason that this discussion is good between us 5 right now is because it's a small group of people. And I'm not sure how this would be done, whether it's like freshmen and sophomores do it by floor or orientation groups are smaller. Obviously there's a lot of like caveats and I guess blocks to it, because you also need people to kind of lead the discussions. But if there is a way to kind of make these discussions happen in a smaller group settings, and I want to add that the discussions I think are more helpful when you're with people that are similar to you, but also with people that are not similar to you. So you have kind of like, you're not worried about everyone in the group kind of disagreeing with your point of view, but there are going to be people that push back a little bit and differ a little bit. And that's kind of where I feel like the growth could happen is, I mean, if you're in a room with people that are all different than you, you're not going to feel comfortable expressing your ideas. So I feel like kind of finding that balance in a small group setting would be awesome.
What I would add to that is, this could be my own experience at Tulane, less than the general experience, but I think it's true that clubs and kind of student organizations don't have a huge role in the Tulane student life. And I think that that's hindrance to these kind of conversations because it leads to, like Iris was saying, you being too comfortable, you being with the same people that you're always with. And when you're with the same people you're always with, you don't push yourself on what you talk about and things like that. And I think if clubs were a bigger part of Tulane, then I think you're coming together for different reasons, right? Not for shared perspective or not for, but for one specific shared activity or one specific goal or something like that, right? And so then conversation can kind of reach new ground.
Well, awesome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we appreciate that.
Any last words from you both before we close out today's session?
No, just thank you for having us. I hope you guys had a good time. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks for coming, Neil. All right, everybody, tune in next week for another Mentality Monday. This has been a blast. We hope to see you again and hope you have enjoy the next episode and you enjoyed this episode. Like, comment, subscribe. See ya.
Thanks, y'all.